I never imagined my own living room, usually a calm blend of vanilla-scented candles and soft jazz, could feel like the center of a quiet storm. Yet here I was, standing near the birthday cake I'd spent hours frosting for my son, while my older sister Megan clinked her glass to demand everyone's attention. The room hushed. Little Jacob's laughter, the chatter of neighbors, even the squeals from the bounce house outside. All of it faded. Megan, flawless in her emerald wrap dress, beamed as though she'd been waiting her whole life for this single drumroll moment. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice trembling with a thrill I recognized too well. "I'm pregnant." Gasps and cheers followed, like confetti I hadn't ordered. My heart sank, a quiet drop beneath the applause. I forced a smile, kissed Jacob's forehead, and swallowed the sting creeping at my throat. But Megan wasn't finished. She reached for my arm with a grin that carried a hint of entitlement only a sister can perfect. "Lauren," she said, loud enough for every guest to hear, "since you've already set up a brand new nursery and Jacob's too big for it now, why don't you give it to me?" The room seemed to tilt. The sweet scent of frosting turned heavy, like overripe fruit. I felt every eye flick toward me, waiting for the gracious, easygoing sister to nod and say yes. Inside, something entirely different began to rise. Long before Jacob was born, before Megan's voice could slice through a room with such easy confidence, there was another night I'll never forget. I was 21, home from college for a long weekend, still clutching the belief that family would always be my safety net. It was late, close to midnight, when the argument began. My father's booming voice carried through the hallway like a breaking wave. "You need to be realistic, Lauren. Writing isn't a career. It's a hobby. You'll come home, finish your business degree, and stop this nonsense." I stood in the doorway of our old farmhouse kitchen, my laptop hugged tight to my chest. The glow from the under-cabinet lights reflected off the stainless steel sink, sharp and cold. "But Dad," I said, my voice shaking though I tried to steady it, "I've been offered an internship in New York. It's what I've worked for." Megan sat at the counter, legs crossed neatly, sipping tea like a silent judge. She didn't defend me, she never did. Her glance said everything. "Don't rock the boat." Mom wiped her hands on a dish towel and looked away. "Your father's right," she whispered. "It's time you settled down." The lump in my throat burned like swallowed fire. My hands trembled so badly that I almost dropped the laptop. I remember gripping the chain of the small silver locket Grandma Evelyn had given me the summer before she passed. Inside was a tiny scrap of paper with her handwriting. "Your voice is your gift. Never let anyone silence it." Her words pulsed through me like a quiet heartbeat. I took a breath that felt like a leap. "If you can't support me," I said, surprising even myself with the steadiness of my tone, "I'll support myself." Dad's face hardened. Megan's teacup clinked against its saucer, sharp and final. I turned, heart hammering, and walked out into the cool night air, the locket warm against my skin. Each step toward my old Honda felt like shedding a layer of fear. By the time I reached the car, I was no longer the timid girl they could mold. I was a woman carving her own path, whether or not my family chose to follow. New York smelled like ambition and exhaust, a mix of roasted chestnuts from street vendors and the metallic bite of subway rails. I arrived with 2 suitcases, a half-charged phone, and the locket warm against my collarbone. The city didn't care who I was, and for the first time, that felt like freedom. The internship barely paid for coffee, let alone rent, so I took evening shifts at a corner cafe on 9th Avenue. My feet ached from 12-hour days. I learned to write during subway rides, balancing my laptop on my knees while the train lurched. More than once, I fell asleep over a sentence, the rhythmic rattle of the tracks blending with my dreams. 2 weeks into the job, my editor, a sharp-eyed woman named Caroline Brooks, stopped at my desk. "Mitchell," she said, tapping the edge of a draft-eyed proofread, "you've got a voice that cuts through the noise. Ever thought about writing features, not just fact-checking them?" My heart stuttered. "Every day," I whispered. She smiled, small but sure. "Then start. Tonight. I want a sample on my desk tomorrow." That night, Fueled by burnt cafe coffee and a stubborn hope, I wrote a piece about the quiet power of women who leave home to find their worth. Caroline published it online the next morning. It went modestly viral, just enough for another editor to notice, then another. Opportunities grew like ivy. Freelance columns turned into regular assignments. My first check that covered rent felt like a victory parade. My second, which paid off a credit card, felt like oxygen. Still, I kept my success close, like the locket I never took off. Family calls were brief, carefully edited. When Megan asked, "How's that little writing thing?" I'd laugh and say, "Still typing away," never mentioning the national byline that had just landed in my inbox. Years folded over themselves. My name began appearing in magazines I'd once stacked by my dorm bed. Invitations to speak at conferences arrived. Editors offered book deals. I bought a small brownstone in Brooklyn, a creaky, sunlit place where every floorboard echoed with hard-won independence. When I married Ethan, a quiet software developer who loved my stubborn streak, we built a life rooted in late-night brainstorming and Sunday mornings spent with Jacob once he came along. Ethan designed my office to overlook the garden. I filled it with secondhand books and framed quotes from writers I'd once only admired from afar. And yet, through every milestone, I shared only scraps with my parents and sister. Not from spite, at least not anymore, but because my growth was mine. The silence became its own kind of power, an invisible boundary no one thought to cross. By the time I painted the nursery for Jacob, soft gray walls with stenciled clouds and shelves lined with storybooks, my career had blossomed beyond anything that 21-year-old girl could have imagined. The locket rested against my heart as I brushed the final stroke of paint, a quiet reminder of the promise I'd once made: never let anyone silence my voice. The birthday party stretched late into the evening, but the weight of Megan's announcement lingered long after the last cupcake wrapper hit the trash. By the time the final guest waved goodbye and the house settled into quiet, my thoughts pulsed with a steady, low thrum. She wants the nursery. I tucked Jacob into bed and watched his chest rise and fall beneath the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. His soft breath was a lullaby, a steady counterpoint to the storm in my head. Downstairs, Ethan gathered plates into neat stacks, his calm presence grounding me. "You don't have to decide anything tonight," he said gently when I joined him. "I know." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "But this isn't just about a room." 2 days later, Megan texted, "Can we come by? Mom and Dad too. We need to talk about the nursery." The audacity almost made me laugh, but a strange clarity settled in. Maybe it was time. Saturday afternoon arrived crisp and bright. The maple trees outside our brownstone blazed in shades of copper and gold. I set out coffee and a plate of scones, small courtesies to mask the tension. When the doorbell chimed, Ethan squeezed my hand. "You've got this," he whispered. Megan breezed in first, her pregnancy glow unmistakable, followed by my parents with practiced smiles. Their eyes swept the living room, pausing on the framed magazine covers lining one wall. "Lauren," Dad said slowly, squinting at the bold mastheads. "You wrote these?" "Yes." My heart pounded, but my voice was calm. "And edited."
"And published."
"For the past 7 years." Mom's eyes widened, flicking from the covers to the thick hardcover book resting on the console table. My name, Lauren Mitchell, shone in embossed silver across the spine. "I didn't know you," her words trailed into a whisper. Megan reached for the book, flipping through pages like proof of a secret life. "This is yours? All of it?" "It is," I said, letting the silence stretch. "The columns."
"The book."
"The speaking tours." "The house." I gestured toward the nursery door, left slightly ajar. "And that room, painted and built for Jacob, was my gift to him, just as every word I've written has been a gift to myself." They moved as if drawn by gravity, stepping into the nursery. The late afternoon light streamed across the soft gray walls, catching the silver stencils of drifting clouds. Shelves brimmed with storybooks, a hand-sewn quilt lay folded over the rocking chair. Dad ran a weathered hand over the crib's polished rail. Mom's eyes softened, misty and unsure. Megan stood still, the locket at my throat catching her gaze. "I never knew," she whispered, almost to herself. "You never said." "I tried," I replied quietly.
Once.
"You all told me to be realistic. So I was realistic enough to leave, and brave enough to build this." Silence wrapped the room, heavy yet strangely peaceful. For the first time, I watched recognition, not pity, cross my father's face. "I misjudged you," he admitted, voice low. "I didn't see this." The old hurt eased, not gone but softened like a scar. I rested a hand on Jacob's favorite book atop the shelf and felt the locket warm against my skin. "This nursery," I said, meeting Megan's eyes, "isn't something to be handed over like a spare coat. It's part of Jacob's story, just as my work is part of mine." No one argued. Even Megan, usually quick with a comeback, simply nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of the woman I had become. The silence in the nursery stretched like a held breath. For years I'd dreamed of this kind of pause, not for revenge, but for the space to finally speak without interruption. I stepped closer to the window, where late afternoon light poured across the cloud stencils. "I know you all came here hoping I'd simply give this room away," I began, keeping my tone even. "But before we talk about rooms, we need to talk about respect." Dad shifted uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on the polished crib rail. Mom folded her hands, her wedding ring catching a gleam of sunlight. Megan looked at me, her expression an uneasy mix of defiance and shame. "When I left home," I continued, "I carried Grandma Evelyn's words with me. Your voice is your gift. Never let anyone silence it. But the truth is, I let your words nearly drown me first. I worked, harder than you can imagine, to build this life. To give Jacob a childhood filled with possibility, not limitation." Megan's hand drifted to her still flat stomach. "Lauren, I wasn't trying to take that away." "I believe you," I said gently. But asking for the nursery at Jacob's birthday party felt like the old days. The days when my dreams were treated like something to borrow or dismiss. She flinched, and for a heartbeat, her usual quick retort never came. "This isn't about punishment," I added, my voice softening. "It's about conditions, ones that protect the future for all of us." I turned first to my parents. "If you want to be part of Jacob's life, I need honesty. No more quiet judgments or casual remarks about real careers. I want you to celebrate what I've built, even if it isn't what you once pictured." Mom's eyes welled. Dad gave a slow, sober nod. Then I faced Megan. "I will help you set up a nursery financially, even help you paint if you'd like, but not with this room. Instead, I ask for something bigger, that you raise your child with the kind of unconditional belief I had to fight to find, and that you show Jacob the same respect. He needs to know his voice matters." Megan's lower lip trembled. I can do that," she whispered. A quiet strength settled over me, as if the locket's warmth had spread through every vein. For years, I had carried the weight of proving myself. Now I simply stood in the truth I had already lived. "This isn't a negotiation," I said finally, not unkindly. "It's an invitation to grow together, to be better for the next generation." The tension eased like the last note of a long song. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the golden leaves. Inside, for the first time in years, my family seemed to truly hear me. That evening, after everyone left, the brownstone felt unusually light, like a house that had finally exhaled. The faint scent of coffee and vanilla frosting lingered in the quiet, and for the first time in years, it smelled like possibility instead of tension. Ethan joined me in the nursery, his hand warm against the small of my back. Jacob slept peacefully upstairs, his steady breathing a gentle reminder of why all of this mattered. "You handled that beautifully," Ethan said. "Not just the nursery, everything." I smiled, though the weight of the afternoon still pulsed through me. "It wasn't about winning," I said, brushing my fingers along the silver stenciled clouds. "It was about being heard." Outside, the wind carried the crackle of leaves across the sidewalk. I thought of Dad's quiet nod, of Mom's damp eyes, of Megan's trembling promise. For so long, I'd wanted them to see me, not the daughter who strayed from the family blueprint, but the woman I had become. Today, they finally had. Later, as the house settled into its nighttime hush, I opened the small jewelry box on my dresser. The silver locket lay inside, its delicate chain catching the lamplight. I held it in my palm, feeling its familiar weight.
Click.
The clasp opened, revealing the tiny scrap of paper, yellowed slightly with time. Your voice is your gift. Never let anyone silence it. Grandma Evelyn's handwriting was as steady as the day she wrote it. My throat tightened, not with grief anymore, but with gratitude. I traced the words with my fingertip, letting their quiet power settle deep. I thought of Megan's child, still only a flutter of life, and of Jacob's bright future. Maybe this was what Grandma meant all along, that strength isn't just carving your own path, it's teaching the next generation that their voices matter too. I closed the locket and fastened it around my neck. Its warmth rested against my skin like a quiet heartbeat. Looking out the nursery window, I whispered into the night, a promise to my son, my sister's child, and to the girl I once was. My voice is mine, and I will never let it be silenced again.